Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir. How you doing?
Hey, Scott. How are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We are going to dive into, I always say, I want to say like a mentor, a friend, but someone that's been in the fasting alternative health space for years and years and years. Dr. Valter Longo, one of his studies in the Department of Neuroscience from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. So him and Matson and Harvey did a study, Impact of Intermittent Fasting on Health and Disease Processes. So we're going to dive into some of the longest standing kind of folks that have been in this fasting health space. And I'm excited because I can't believe we actually have never directly done one of his papers before. So I'm just excited because I'm like, man, really? Like this is like, we searched the archives. Like how have we not done a Valter Longo paper? So excited for that conversation today. If you are new to the podcast, don't worry. I just said a lot of words, but as we like to do every single episode is give you one or two actionable steps that you can take to put into your day-to-day fasting lifestyle. We are on this journey with you. If you want to learn more about us and why we do what we do, head back to episode 1. Give it a listen. You'll learn more about our stories, how fasting has transformed our lives, and ultimately why we decide to show up each and every week and have our challenges and our resources and our coaching, etc., to help people heal, lose weight once and for good, and get off that damn dieting roller coaster. So,
heck yeah.
If you're new, welcome in. If you're an OG, shout out. Thanks for continuing to pad the stats and continuing to show the podcast world that we bring value with downloads. So, shameless plug, please rate, review, share, forward, subscribe, unsubscribe, reset, whatever you have to do to follow the show and continue to be on this journey with us. We appreciate you truly.
Yes, thank you.
Full of gratitude that we have millions of downloads and have impacted so many folks. I want to give a shout out, Tommy, to Mongoose 1011. This is one of our most recent 5-star reviews. He said, these two, he or she, great information, entertaining and effective. I'm the entertaining one. Tommy's the good looking one.
Yeah.
These two are a pleasure to listen to. They're passionate about what they do and quite knowledgeable. I've lost 37 pounds over 6 months and feel great.
Nice.
This is my favorite part. They know the science, but are not absolutist or fanatical.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That.
I am bowing. You can't see it, but I'm bowing.
Yeah.
One of my go-to podcasts. Thank you so much. Mongoose 1011. Appreciate you being on this journey. Congratulations, first and foremost, on those incredible results. Keep up the good work.
Amazing.
Let us know how you're doing. Shoot us an email or a message if you ever need anything. We try to get to them all. But we are absolutely grateful to be able to do this with so many of the folks that we don't even know that are doing it out there with us on this fasting and health journey. So
amazing.
Tommy, impact of intermittent fasting on health and disease process. What the fast?
Yeah, right. That's quite a range, quite a large bucket right there. So, when we start talking about intermittent fasting and we go, okay, but why? Usually the shiny object for, why you and I were brought into intermittent fasting was for weight loss necessity, right?
Yeah.
But, it was
got to do something, man.
Yeah,
it ain't working.
I know. And it was health related weight. It's like you can live with some extra weight on your frame. You can live with a lot of extra weight on your frame And sometimes, it's a slow process. You might get used to not being able to do things like you were before, or maybe you adapt to it. I mean, I know a lot of people who do high level exercise, a lot of, cardio work, a lot of like long distance stuff, or big time intense strength training that have significant amounts of weight that they could lose. And sometimes they want to lose as well. So it's not always clear that the weight is impacting our health results. But at the same time, we know, especially from what we've learned over the last decade or so about longevity, health optimization, quality of life, health span, all of these kind of terms, that the weight absolutely puts a drag, puts a drain, accelerates a lot of the aging processes. We have things that are emerging, like the fact that we have type 3 diabetes. The most metabolically active tissue in the body is the brain's tissue, and the impact of cardiometabolic issues on the brain as we get later in life. It's like there's a mismatch between the body and the brain, and it's most likely because of the decades of metabolic related diseases that can be perpetuating and accelerating during that process. So that it's a big bucket.
Yeah, and that's interesting because right now there's this movement in healthcare, this complementary alternative movement, CAM, where people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. The system isn't working; it's failing. We've got more metabolic disease. Anywhere between Dr. Callie and Casey Means are on the speaking tour right now. You got RFK out there, willing to take on big food and big pharma and big toxin or whatever you want to call it. Right? Not going down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole here, but like. There's some real stuff that's changed since the 70s and 80s, and it's showing in our population data of 74% of the population being obese or overweight, and then all the cardiovascular risk and diabetes and blood sugar. So what I just heard you saying there was, as we age, this chronic induced lifestyle conditions are ramping up, yet we have more healthcare and money and medication than ever before. And there's just this disconnect of why isn't it working? Right. So I love the messages that like there seems to be this shift on, all right, well, what are the things that we can control? How do we ultimately get the weight off? What have we done historically? What's worked? Right? What hasn't worked? So I love the beginning point of the abstract of this paper where it says humans in modern societies typically consume food at least 3 times a day. Right? In the metabolism world, it's 3+ snacks. Got to get your protein in, eat that protein before you go to bed.
Yeah.
While lab animals,
stoke the fire.
Yeah, stoke the fire, stoke the metabolism, right? While lab animals are fed ad libitum. Overconsumption of food with such eating patterns often leads to metabolic morbidities, insulin resistance, excessive accumulation of visceral fat, stuff we were just talking about, Tommy, things you may not know right now.
Yeah.
But as we go through the later decades, they are definitely going to have an effect on overall health and longevity, quality of life, et cetera. And then it says, particularly when associated with a sedentary lifestyle. So more than ever before, we're sitting ourselves up. We are sitting more than ever, right?
Sure.
So I love that starting. Right, what's that?
I'm sitting right now.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Same. Right. So when we're looking at the animals, the human studies, this is a broad stroke. And we know that about the abstract of this paper. So it looks at modern eating patterns, right? We just mentioned it. It looks at the evolutionary perspective, right? Because scarce food availability, feast or famine, right? Evolution, definition of intermittent fasting and periodic fasting or fast mimicking diets. So we'll talk about the fasting that they studied in the study and they looked at. We'll talk about the health benefits in animals. Now, some of these studies are in mice and rats, and we understand that. But we do have some human studies here, specifically in regards to BDNF, that are interesting, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is a cool thing we're going to highlight here with this article. Then they talk about the mechanisms of action and the fact that, yes, we always need more research to dive into these types of topics. But the cool thing is, Tommy, if we set the stage here from the beginning, is what were the main conclusions or the main takeaways? What were those categories of benefit that we saw, right? So if we begin with the end in mind, what are the things that these different fasting windows can help with? Because the question we get also often is, what's the best fasting window? I don't know. How much experience do you have? Do you like fasting? What happens to your hunger? Do you get headaches? Are you male or female? Like, what kind of food do you like to eat? What are your eating relationship with food? all these
Ooh.
different types of things.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. What about scheduling for the week? Like something like, do you have a date night every week? Are you very, very social?
A simple taco truck in the parking lot every day. Like,
might you have a yes problem that's going on that could then affect your fasting discipline as well? So there's a lot of things that kind of come up into like what's the best fasting schedule, and that's just one of them right there. And so when we look at the benefits of this, I also wanted to go back one step. You mentioned human studies and mouse studies, and that's a big thing, because if we're going to learn anything, it's usually going to start. It could start well before mice and rats, but at the same time, when we get into mammal models, we need mice and rats to kind of display
test
some
the
pathways.
Hypotheses.
Yeah, and like start somewhere, and a lot of those pathways are similar, not the same, but similar. But metabolically, what's really interesting is that mice and rats have such a high metabolic rate that we can observe changes that might take a long, long time to even look at in humans. Like if it's safe to do in humans, it's still going to take a lot longer to usually actually show up. Whereas you can do something like change a receptor, block one, mutate a generation or two of rats or mice very, very quickly, and then you can see what would happen if this one is knocked out, this particular gene or this particular receptor. So there's a lot of value in looking at some of these things and going, well, that might be a pathway that's very, very important in humans. This is how the effect might go. But one of the dangers that I see with all of the Dr. Google, all of the AI stuff, is that when you go to plug in a question, you might get an answer that's talking about a mice or a rat study where it may not make that clear. And so if you're looking at something like, hey, a 6-hour this or a 12-hour this, that might have been from a mouse or a rat. And those same number of hours may be the equivalent of 24, 72, like a lot.
Yeah, because they metabolize stuff so much faster than us is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And so I've seen some Google and AI related like confounding of data and results that could lead to misinterpretation sometimes as well. So we have to be careful about those.
Exactly. So good perspective on kind of highlighting some of the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of looking at these types of things.
Mm-hmm.
This study, however, did a really good job of kind of self-disparaging itself. That's redundant. Is like highlighting those things. So let's talk about the fasting specifically, that the regimens that they looked at. They looked at alternate day fasting. Mm-hmm. So we've talked and done a lot. Probably one of the most studied fasting regimens out there. Now we're starting to see more TRE, time restricted eating, TRF, time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting type windows. But alternative fasting is where you're going to complete fasting every other day, or modified, which is a small 500 or 600 calorie meal on your fasting days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they looked at ADF, they looked at TRF, which is going to restrict food intake to a specific window of 6 to 8 hours. So this is a starting point for most people who start fasting, where it's skip breakfast, 16-8, right? 18-6 is the window where you fast for 16 hours. You have opportunity to consume food and nutrition for 8 hours, or 18 hours of fasting versus 6 hours of a nutrition opportunity. So they looked at different forms of that. They looked at periodic fasting, or even fast mimicking diets that were lasting. These are diets that are specifically designed to mimic fasting, but you're consuming food. Prolon is one of the big ones.
Yeah, smaller amounts of calories in kind of strategic or timed intervals.
Now, Valter Longo, I believe Hadahan owns it, created it to some degree, right? So there is benefit there, but there's also in this periodic fasting category in the study that they looked at 2 to 5 days of water only fasting, which is something that we love periodically as well.
Yeah, some more extended.
Yep, extended fast. And then they also looked at the 5-2 diet, which is kind of 5 days on of normal eating and 2 days of fasting. For the most part, there's different variations of it, but
yeah, 5-2 has probably 3 or 4 very, very popular iterations that are used. So every time we're reviewing a study with that, it's interesting to see exactly which way they went with that one. And then a lot of times on these studies, you also have the fact that They make it a pretty big point to say, let's say we're starting off with an 8-hour nutrition opportunity window. They'll call it an 8-hour feeding window or an 8-hour feasting window or something else along those lines. But like you said, oftentimes that's skipping breakfast. So it might be starting at 12 noon, like a lunchtime. And then that's when the window opens. And then they don't really usually monitor what's coming in or track it necessarily. They don't say you have to stick to XYZ. They just kind of open that window. And so there are some variations in the effectiveness of that. But, one of the key points would be no eating after that window is closed. So let's say that's at 8 p.m. So that can be a good thing, especially if you're not compartmentalizing your food at all. And then you go to that and then you say, okay, no late night snacking, which can be a slippery slope for lots of folks, myself and my former self included, for sure.
Right. So we talk a lot about fasting types. We talk a lot about fasting. So if you're looking for more guidance, if you're newer to the podcast, head to the show notes, head to the website, grab the Blueprint to Fasting for Fat Loss, grab one of the resources, the quick start, the fast start guide, start somewhere, right? But so we're talking a lot about different and more advanced fasting windows. If you're looking for that initial ramp or you need to get back on track, the Blueprint's your place to go. I wanted to mention that before we get into some of the results of this paper and then go down the rabbit hole of talking about hunger, obesity, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is BDNF, which is cool because that's a positive thing and we want that.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about a couple of levers that you can do to increase it here. But the results of the paper, big picture, were in the few different categories of cellular and molecular mechanisms. So it showed that IF enhances the resistance of cells, tissues, and organs to stress and diseases related to aging and sedentary lifestyles.
Wow.
Heck yeah. How does it do it? Well, it also includes delaying neuronal dysfunction in models of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's diseases. So we're talking about, diabetes as type 3, Alzheimer's and dementia as type 3 diabetes, as not a plaque problem, but a blood sugar, metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial problem, right? That happens over the years.
Yeah, the same way that the plaques in our endothelial cells are inflammatory or inflammation-induced plaques, right? Like there is a mechanism in the body where we produce more plaques as an inflammatory protection. But the fact that if you go further back downstream to where those kind of came from, or upstream rather, for where they kind of developed, you see some parallels there. That again is taking decades to kind of parse out in the research, but it's leaving clues all over the place as we kind of invest and get smarter about cardiometabolic diseases and what those decades long processes are to develop these too.
Yeah, 100%. Another category they looked at was health improvements in animals. So again, laboratory rats and mice on IF diet should improve health indicators such as reduced insulin and leptin levels, increased sensitivity to those. So leptin is your hunger hormone, and there's something called leptin resistance. So if you can never close the fasting window, or you feel like you're on this crave, eat, crash cycle, that's an indication that you have some form of leptin or insulin resistance. You can grab the insulin assessment that's on our website as well if you want to learn more about that.
That was me for years too.
Right?
Yep.
Fighting keeping the calorie equation, my steps up, and trying to figure out I'm going to put the pieces together, the Tetris style of like, all right, what foods can I put in? What am managing those cravings and the hunger cues, et cetera.
Can I get an extra cardio workout at the end of the day to kind of, provide a little bit more of a caloric gap there?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this specifically mentioned in animals, those things, plus reduced body fat, elevated ketone levels, which is a positive, and improved heart and brain stress resistance. Now, we've done dozens of articles where those same improvements I just mentioned were also found in humans. So if you want those, go back and listen to the podcast. You will find them, I promise.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Because most of these pathways are very similar between mice and rats and humans. But then the thing about it is that some of these things are difficult to measure in vitro, and so, or in vivo rather. So that can be the problem where, you put something through, you put a subject through one of these protocols, and then you go, how is BDNF doing? Well, difficult to actually measure in real time. So that's part of the reason why a lot of these things need to be kind of laid out in a mouse or a rat model.
Then we look at weight loss and maintenance. So intermittent fasting shown potential for weight loss and maintenance, and some indicating equivalent or superior effects compared to continuous energy restriction, or what we call calorie counting, calorie deficit, excuse me.
Sure.
They refer to as CER in this article.
Well, that's because you're lowering calories, but
right.
but you still keep spiking insulin.
Right.
So you're not experiencing
the standard calorie restriction approach to weight loss.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, you're kind of undoing most of the benefit that you need. It's not just about the caloric restriction. That is definitely part of the equation. That's a big part of the equation, actually. But if you're continuing to stimulate insulin while you're restricting calories, then that's a problem, because you're tipping the scales towards fat storage mode and towards certain anabolic pathways with insulin, but then you're underfeeding those high insulin levels. And so that actually throws a wrench into a lot of biochemical pathways. And so if we're going to restrict calories, we need it to be done in a lower insulin and insulin reducing environment, excuse me, in an insulin reducing environment where we can actually drop blood sugar down and also raise ketones at the same time.
Another cool, interesting category here, and this is where Valter Longo has a lot of research, hard to find these days, but in the cancer and chronic disease category. So there were small IF trials on cancer and multiple sclerosis patients showing promising results. So this is cool because it shows the benefits for chronic age and obesity related disorders. So just the fact that this is possible should be encouraging, right?
Yeah.
Another category is the metabolic and cardiovascular benefits. We talk about this at length, is reductions in cholesterol, triglycerides, inflammation, markers of oxidative stress, along improvements in the entire blood sugar cascade, blood sugar management, blood sugar storage, fat burning, insulin functionality in terms of resistance versus sensitivity. All of that has been shown benefits in that category of metabolic and cardiovascular considerations. And then a direct relationship here in this article, they mentioned that studies have shown variable results in improved insulin sensitivity. The reality is there's always an improvement in the HOMA-IR or the insulin sensitivity, one or the other, in every article that we've looked at up until this point, as the shout out we gave in the beginning to Mongoose, I believe. We are not fanatical or absolutists. So I know I'm saying every study that we've looked at so far, right? There's an improvement in this blood sugar cascade. It may not be A1C in that study. It may be HOMA-IR. It may not be HOMA-IR in that study, but it'll be A1C. It may be fasting blood sugar in this study, but it may be insulin sensitivity in this study, or leptin like something in that category with fasting and intermittent fasting has been shown to be improved. And the reality of the variability there is just like, where's that person on their health journey? Where's their stress levels? Where's their hydration? Where's their medications they're on? How's their sleep? There's so many things that affect metabolic function and mitochondrial function that it's just like, yeah, we're not going to see a very consistent, exact correlation in every study. But the category of insulin sensitivity to insulin resistance, there's always improvements in all the studies that we've looked at so far.
Yeah, and like I really like this. This was the first time I've seen this talked about, which was that they're looking at heart rate, resting heart rate variability, and then also stress resiliency. And so stress resiliency is an interesting one too, because you just mentioned sleep and a host of other factors here. Stress is one of those ones that it's difficult to just pull a switch and flip a switch and then just control your external stressors. But at the same time, external stressors are having a significant physiological impact. And so just the fact that intermittent fasting in several of these studies was shown to greatly increase stress resiliency responses within the body, which is psychological and physiological, is a huge thing, because stress resiliency is then leading to the blood sugar and the insulin related issues, the cardiovascular comorbidities, and a host of physiological processes like premature aging and other disease processes too. And so also seeing a rapid decrease in resting heart rate, which is a high level marker for cardiovascular capacity, and then an increase in heart rate variability, which is one of the newer but most important markers that we're looking at as far as longevity goes too. Incredible.
I'm a big, and we've done a couple of different conversations around heart rate variability. With my Whoop, that's something that I've been working on or wanting to work on, and it's a slow slog. But there are definitely things that will tank it immediately, which is not sleeping, eating, having poor food choices, or eating late. So a lot of carbs for me will do it, or processed food, and alcohol. Will absolutely tank my HRV.
Will crush it immediately. Now,
interestingly, recently I got really sick for about a month, and during that time, my heart rate variability actually went up considerably during that period.
Why do you think that is?
Well, my body was trying to heal, for one, and I was doing a hell of a lot less than I normally do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
And even though I wasn't sleeping more, I was resting more.
Okay.
And guess what? Heart rate variability went up. So it's a fickle little thing.
Sure.
But the cool thing is,
what about eating, appetite during that time when you were feeling sick? Were you feeling like?
No, my appetite was pretty non-existent.
Okay. So probably not a lot of later day snacking or late night eating, those kind of things that would also make heart rate variability.
Yep. None of that.
Wow.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yep.
Silver lining then.
Right. So it's interesting, however, how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. When we looked at this BDNF conversation, I just want to make there's something you pointed out to me that I found really interesting. So in mice, hyperphagic, meaning hungry all the time, and obese mice as a consequence of insufficiency of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, right? What they found was ADF, the alternate day fasting, reverses the insulin resistance and reduces the circulating levels of insulin and leptin.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about this lifestyle that can derail you or require thought or forethought or management of, right? Getting off the dieting mindset or roller coaster. Am I on? Am I off? What am I going to do? Am I going to eat? Am I not going to eat? Am I say yes to the donut or no? The food noise, so to speak. It was cool that one of those things that drives that is hunger, right? And hormones. So fasting anywhere from 18 up to 36 hours, your BDNF is going to go up.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And that's this. Once you break through a fasting window, you get this like euphoric. And this is what stimulated me thinking about this, is when you asked about my hunger when I wasn't feeling well, is that, I was inherently fasting. Oh, and guess what? Sure. I felt terrible, but I wasn't really hungry. But when I'm not feeling sick and I'm fasting, once I get past that 18 to 24 hour mark, you kind of get like this feeling, right? Where you're like, I feel pretty good. I'm not really hungry. My cravings have gone. You do a 36 or a 72 hour fast. And they looked at some of the PF studies in this article where it's like, I just broke through. My cravings are gone.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see.
Yeah, that really is. And like the fact that you can increase BDNF and do it in a very intentional way is really cool, because what we also saw was that BDNF likely has a causal link in some cases of obesity and diabetes as well, where in some
and Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah. And that wasn't known a long time ago, because now looking at some of these mice and rat studies, they either increase the concentration of BDNF or allow it to be received by the receptor in the brain, then it's reversing the diabetes and the obesity, which is the same way that leptin behaves in those same animal studies. So that's a really interesting thing, because most of us walking around with some weight to lose don't have a BDNF problem.
Some of you are going, what the BDNF? What the hell are these guys talking about? Yeah.
Well, the thing is that lower BDNF levels are correlated with weight. Right. So as we put weight on,
because they fuel hunger and cravings, right? Which goes hand in hand with leptin, which is a part of the calorie restriction diet mentality lifestyle. So before we wrap up, Tommy, let's make the BDNF sciencey nerd out piece kind of from Valter, Longo, and all his years of extensive research practical as we try to do. So we know that fasting between 18 to 36 hours increases that BDNF sliding scale depending on your level of ketosis, how much fasting you've had, how much carbs you had, how's your sleep, all of that. But we know that it's consistently between that window. And ultimately, that's going to help reduce those constant hunger cravings and signals. And you kind of get that euphoric feeling because it goes and bathes the brain.
Yes.
So this is why people often report that mentally sharper and more in control type feeling once they have that breakthrough of those initial fasting windows, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we see with our coaching members as well, because what's really fascinating is how it really ties back to getting past those initial points, those initial hours, and seeing how the hunger signals actually balance out, and then experiencing that mental clarity and the reduced craving. So it's not just pushing into more willpower, which is what it feels like before you experience that, but there's actually a biochemical reaction that's happening, and it's responsible for this, this whole new arena that you feel.
Yeah, so it's not just, I won't eat that donut, or I will have the strength to fight. Well, no, it's literally your body's underlying physiology saying, yeah, you got this, right? And you can't get there until you cut. There's just some timing mechanisms that need to take place right now. Breaking your fast, different foods, all that stuff, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, does have an effect on how quickly you can get here, but consistency wins every single time. So. Yes. In terms of action steps, number one, if you're new to fasting and getting back on track, start with a simple window and work your way up, right? And that's why we have the blueprint. The research we discussed today shows even just this basic window, regardless of how long it is or what type or what, style of fast you do or what dogmatic black and white on it, like whatever, all those rules aside, just the fact that, sticking with that fasting window or a fasting window, the research clearly shows that we're going to have a benefit, right?
Yeah, like instead of jumping around and not being consistent and going, I'm not really sure what I should do, stick with a fast, even if you want to do some of the longer fast that we've discussed, or start extending your fast a bit, then just starting with the consistency piece of the basic 16-8 fast, where you're 16 hours fasted, an 8-hour nutrition opportunity window. But if you're already comfortable with that, then push it a little bit further in a consistent way. Go to 18 hours fasted with a 6-hour nutrition window, or take the next step, go to thefastingforlife.com, grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss, and look at the ways to push that even a little bit further. Because as you do that consistency piece means better, more consistent BDNF levels, less needing to rely on willpower, and making the process much more enjoyable, intuitive, and consistent over the long term.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what we see during our challenges too, is that we help in real time with real-time encouragement and accountability for people to push through these. Now, you might be an experienced faster going, well, I do 72 hours all the time. I'm okay, great. Sure. Are you at maintenance? Do you still have weight to lose? Do you still have metabolic dysfunction? So the consistency always going to win. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's that progress over perfection. So if you're not progressing, then we need to kind of look at the action steps you're taking and the way you're thinking about it, which is why we love doing these live events, 7 or 8 times a year. So Dr. Longo absolutely shows that multiple fasting approaches can work, but it's the application to you, time restricted feeding, alternate day fasting, periodic extended fast cycling, which is what we teach, and how you apply that to yourself, that's ultimately going to get you there. So you got to try some different things. That's why that's why we created the blueprint. And that's going to be the next step for a lot of you, is to start to hit that consistency window, specifically for your ad. If you want more help, hop on, join the challenge, email us, reach out, because we absolutely love seeing your success stories. We've been highlighting them on the front of the episodes, and really appreciate if you would, grab a resource, take an action step, implement today, and always appreciative of the ratings, reviews, and share it with a friend or family member today that could really use a little more encouragement as we go into the holidays. So Hope you found today's episode valuable, Tommy. Appreciate the conversation as always, man, and we'll talk soon.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.